Challenging, thought-provoking, insightful. This is God in Country, the collision of faith and politics, hosted by nationally known speaker, Reverend Dr. Sean Michael Greener. Not your typical Rev. Dr. Sean is a proud military veteran, former law enforcement officer, and founder of the internationally regarded Executive Protection Team. Through counseling, elite life coaching, and national speaking, this ninja pastor tells it like it is. This series is biblically and politically engaged with the pedal to the metal. With today's edition of God in Country, here is host and author of the acclaimed yet controversial book, Excellence Killed the Church: How Mediocrity is Destroying America, Dr. Sean Michael Greener.
Hello. Thank you for joining us today. We are really appreciative of it. Just to let you know, chat is open, and I have an awful lot to get through today. It has been a busy time. As always, we eat so good here. The food is excellent. There's lots of it. If you're in the Newark, Delaware area, I would encourage you to come. Really, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and we've had people come from as far away as the D.C. area. We've actually had people come from even farther than that. So if you're in the area, we'll make sure you're fed and given good stuff to drink, and you're nice and comfortable. You probably even sit in a recliner chair. If you time your arrival right around 5, you'll sit in a recliner. So we'll treat you real well. So 5 o'clock we eat, and then 5:30 we go live here. This is a broadcast about truth, the truth about gun violence and gun control, and where we as believers stand on both of these issues. Now, I must say this will be an atypical broadcast for me for a Sunday broadcast. Normally Sundays were a lot less political, but to be very honest with you, I think the church needs to take a lead in this area. The church is very, very mistaken about weapons. I will say this is no offense to any of the young brothers out there serving in churches all across the country, but we have a particularly effeminate pastorate by percentage. If you were to go to pick 100 churches across the country, a cross-section, you will find that a lot of the younger pastors, very successful from a number standpoint, are also very effeminate. They have no experience with guns. They have no experience hunting or anything of those things that people of my age or older are certainly very aware of. I say that to say this, that this message I felt was apropos for the church, and we have, by Wednesday evening at 7, we have about 2 million people listen to this broadcast and the other broadcasts. So it gets out to enough people where that's a broad enough cross-section, not only here but around the world, to say fairly confidently, listen, we've got a different church body now than we used to have. And a lot of you, like I talk about in my book, a lot of you who are in the church, you are also in the community working. Workplace violence is a huge issue. Many of the people that follow what I do are school teachers. We have a huge police officer, law enforcement following, both at the local all the way up through the federal level, and many, many military folks. And to our Gold Star families, we say hello to you. I know Border Patrol Officer Terry was murdered by an illegal gun supplied through Fast and Furious to the Obama administration. And I know that his mother is listening right now, and we're honored to have you. So thank you so much for joining us. Here's the thing. We have to know where we stand. We can't answer. This is an issue that you cannot be on the fence. You can't straddle a fence on this issue, gun violence and gun control. Believers, you have to know where you stand, and I'm going to try to help you with that. Where you stand, you say, well, my belief is my belief. Everyone's entitled to their belief. The problem with that is if you are particularly wrong, then guess what? Guess what happens? You're believing strong. You're moving forward, decide, resolve, and stand, and guess what happens? You're believing the wrong thing. We have a doctor in the house. If you are at a trauma situation and you believe that the person needs something specific, and you as the doctor, the only one on scene that has any such experience, and then all of a sudden someone rides up and they stayed at a Motel 6 last night, and they say, or a whatever inn, whatever it's called, a hotel, Holiday Inn Express, they stayed there and they saw a show, and in the show the TV doctor did this or that. No, I'm confident this is what you do. And you look at them and say, what are you talking about? I'm a physician. This is exactly what you do. You say, okay, fine. Go ahead. I mean, if you believe that strongly. And that's the thing. The person will likely die. If it was a life-saving thing, it can't be about how strong you believe. Lots of people believe things that simply aren't so. Amen? So this is a broadcast of truth. And the thing is, in order to stand on the truth, you have to know the truth. And by the end of this message, you will know the truth. I've learned that, and this occurred to me, the older I get, the more I realize this. I've learned that many people not only cannot handle the truth, they don't want to know the truth. They can't handle it anyway, and they don't want to know, so they hide. They shelter in place, in a very bad place in their mind, in their belief system, their paradigm. And now first, for the fullest understanding, we have to establish baselines and benchmarks of truth and data. We have to do that. Let's just start somewhere. We have to say, okay, what data, what benchmarks, what baselines are we going to work from? My daughter's finishing up veterinary medical school, and I can tell you in that there's a gazillion things that are baselines, benchmarks, and they are the data. And you can believe as hard as you want one way, but the fact of the matter of it is, when it comes test time, when it comes to due time, you had better know what the right benchmark and baseline is. You've got to go from the truth. And so I'm going to present things that are solid. They're very, very solid, benchmarks and baselines and data. And it's confirmed by multiple sources, so I don't want you to think I'm throwing out stuff I'm making up. Now, one other thing, I'm going to talk about this really quick, because you need to understand how you can be impacted, not only as just a regular human being, but also a believer. Here's the thing. They believe you are a sucker, believer, all across the world listening. Last week was our largest Sunday show ever, by the way. How exciting is that? The largest number of people in the largest number of countries listening that we can track. All that said to say this, broad enough cross-section of believers, the left believes that you are stupid. The left believes that you are soft. They believe that you can be cajoled or yelled at or barked at. They believe you can be spit in the face. Joy Behar, a great example of ABC's The View. Now you might think, now what does this got to do with gun control and gun violence? Shooting for the truth and understanding here. Don't pardon the pun, that was intentional. Here's the thing. Joy Behar thinks you're stupid and you're weak, and that you won't stand up for your faith. Now she'll spout a bunch of stuff that's absolutely, completely untrue. Not just untrue, it's a lie. And she knows it's a lie when she says it. But what does she say it with? She says it with conviction. She doesn't care that it's a lie. The left doesn't care that the data they spout out, the benchmarks and the baselines they spout out about guns and violence in America and in American schools are a lie. They only care about the end result. Now what is the data truth-wise? What is the true data and about the 18 school shootings in 1 year in America? You hear that. You can't turn on the radio or the television without hearing that. The left says, and the media, redundant, I know, that there are 18 school shootings this year. The problem is this simply isn't true. 6 or 7, though 6 or 7 too many, 6 or 7 actual shootings, school shootings in last year. Described and defined by someone who has some level of common sense. Though you'd never expect USA Today. Now this is a place I never go to if I want accurate information. But in this particular case, I was stunned to find an editorial. The head of the editorial board there wrote an article. I'm going to read it to you, or at least parts of it. But I didn't think the USA Today. You guys know that that's a Gannett paper. It's or Gannett, whatever you call it, and they're not known for their accuracy or desire to be accurate or at all unbiased, right? We can agree on that. That's a baseline we can all agree on. But here's the thing. Sometimes you have to kind of look around at different resources and say, okay, what's the left saying? And I was stunned to find the left is saying this. Now, I want you to remember as I'm reading this, every side has its agenda. Every side, every people, every group has its paradigm and its agenda and its intent. Propaganda is used to drive agenda. And so remember that, keep that in the back of your mind. No, there have not been 18 school shootings already this year, as CNBC, Politico, The Washington Post, ABC, CNN, the New York Daily News, and many others keep repeating. And briefly, a USA Today column, all reported in the hours since a 19-year-old allegedly slaughtered 17 people at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. By the way, God bless the listeners have reached out to me that live in Parkland. They describe Parkland as a nice town. This is not something you could particularly expect there. You wouldn't anticipate a school shooting there in their town. I actually gave 2 speeches there some time ago. I found it to be a lovely town, although I'd not been to the school. Now, this happened when? Ash Wednesday. I just want to say this. This isn't written in my notes for today, but I want to share this with you. No cost or obligation to you. A CNN reporter. They've since pulled it because I was gonna play the audio for you tonight, so you would believe me. CNN reporter. The blood isn't even congealed on the floor from these 17 that were killed and the many others who were injured. The blood hadn't even congealed, and guess what happened? A CNN reporter shoved a microphone on the site and was asking what happened and all this stuff. And the lady was marked with. If you go to my website, DrSeanGreener.com, you see the lady. It's plainly a cross, Ash Wednesday cross. This is how godless our media has become. You see, there was a time where maybe they were godless. Maybe they were godless. Hello, Mr. Mike Myers. Thank you so much for listening. It's an honor to have you listening. Maybe you should think about this paradigm, this agenda, as being very, very important, because it is. This CNN reporter said on live international television, by the way, you know that you have some smudges on your forehead. The lady, absolutely stunned, looked at her and said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Well, you might have hit your head on something. You've got smudges on your head." And she said, "Those are my Palm Wednesday ashes." Just gobsmacked that this reporter should have known, seeing as there were many there that had them. That's important for you to know. Fake stats like that make finding a solution to the real problem of gun violence, which has actually struck American schools at least 6 times this year, that much harder. Amping up fears and muddying the search for fixes that can cut back the senseless violence only undermines efforts to reconcile the real concerns of parents and the legitimate desire of civil rights advocates to protect the Bill of Rights. I want you to remember this name. Everytown for Gun Safety. One word, Everytown for Gun Safety. The gun control advocacy group responsible for spreading this bogus statistic should be ashamed of its blatant dishonesty. Remember what I said. I said they'll lie. Joy Behar knew she was telling a lie. This Everytown for Gun Safety knows they're telling a lie. They know for a fact that number 18 is a lie, but they keep saying it. Why? They keep saying it with resolve. They keep saying it with conviction. And you know what happens in America. If it's played on the national news, you partly believe it, because you just can't believe somebody would lie to you. If it's on the print page of your favorite newspaper, you think, well, they wouldn't lie to me, but they absolutely do. And they absolutely did. When parents hear the words school shooting, their hearts freeze and their heads fill with images of Sandy Hook. Dead and dying grade schoolers, broken and bleeding in a classroom, helpless teachers crying over their charges, and slain colleagues as a black-clad killer switches magazines in his AR-15. That's mostly what Everytown is talking about. That's what they're talking about. That's what they want you to see. In your mind's eye, they want you to see that. Back to the article. The Washington Post reported Everytown's propaganda. It included some important caveats. That data point, this is quote, includes any discharge of a firearm at a school, including accidents, as a shooting. A school shooting. It also includes incidents that happen to take place at a school, whether students were involved or not. The Post should have kept including caveats, some of which I'm going to share with you now. By Everytown's criteria, nobody has to be injured, and the shooting doesn't actually have to take place on campus, though it does have to be heard. That's right, you heard right. If there's a shooting within hearing range of the campus, it counts as a school shooting. Doesn't have to take place at the school or whether the students were involved or even there or not. They specify here that although it doesn't have to take place on campus, it does have to be heard or a bullet has to hit somewhere on campus. Let's be clear. Here are some examples. On January 3rd, you'll be blown away by this as I was. On January 3rd, a 31-year-old military veteran who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, a traumatic brain injury, and depression shot himself in the school parking lot after he called police to report that he was suicidal, according to the Lansing, Michigan State Journal, part of the USA Today network. Everytown removed this instance from their report after the Post found that the school had been closed down for months. Now, I want you to understand what I said to you there. It's very important that you understand the baseline of how absolutely dishonest they are. Not only was this one person in a parking lot after normal school hours, the school hadn't actually held students. It had been closed down for 4 months. And they counted that as a school shooting when he took his own life. On January 10th, Denison, Texas, at Grayson College Criminal Justice Center, a student mistook a real firearm belonging to an officer who was authorized to carry the weapon for a practice weapon and fired it into a wall. No one was killed. No one was even injured. On February 5th in Maplewood, Minnesota, a third grader pulled the trigger on a police gun while the officer was sitting on a bench. No one was killed or injured. In fact, a round was not even discharged. In 8 of the 18 cases originally counted by Everytown, no one was injured or killed. 2 were suicides. And it sure isn't necessary to inflate the number of school shootings this year. The real number, according to a stricter definition used by the Post, is at least 7 shootings targeting teachers and students. USA Today's news department counts 6. In any case, that's about 1 a week since the beginning of the year. And that alone is a horrifying statistic. Indeed, in one case, Everytown included a school shooting in a town with fresh scars from a real school shooting. On January 10th, according to the Desert Sun, a gun was fired from off campus and a bullet struck the visual arts building at Cal State University San Bernardino. Now, you remember San Bernardino, where the Muslim husband and wife killed their workmates and then got on a chase and were killed by police. Now, at that case where the bullet struck the visual arts building, no one was killed or injured. Everytown counted that ambiguous incident as a school shooting anyway. That must be mystifying to those who suffered through a real murder-suicide situation in North Park Elementary School just last year. In April, an angry man gunned down his estranged wife, who happened to have been a teacher at the school. Before killing himself, he also shot 2 of her students in the process, killing 1. The people of San Bernardino and parents all across America know what a school shooting is. We don't need fake stats to pressure lawmakers into action. The real facts are horrifying enough. This is Dan Mustio he's the deputy editorial page editor of USA Today. Now, I want to say something, and I want you to just kind of raise your hand if you know who said this. We cannot tolerate a society and live in a country with any level of pride when our babies are being slaughtered. Kamala Harris, thought of by most to be a front runner to run for the Democrats in 2020 for the office of President of the United States. We cannot tolerate a society and live in a country with any level of pride when our babies are being slaughtered. She happens to be black, and 82% of black babies never survive the womb due to abortion. We will talk more about that later. Apparently, she doesn't have any problem with intentionally killing the babies, but when someone takes a gun instead of a scalpel, she takes offense. We hear from politically correct side of law enforcement that we should shelter in place. You guys know that I'm not a fan of sheltering in place. I don't believe in it. As a tool of personal defense and when needed offense, it is a fail at nearly every option. Unless you can block and keep closed from the inside of a room, a door, you are only selecting where you're most likely to die. We also need to be cognizant of the failings of those instructions to shelter in place until help comes. They are the help. Law enforcement is the help. And even though they try very, very hard, guess what I found as a law enforcement officer? I'm usually arriving to do an investigation and write a report and observe the carnage. We need to establish a more effective strategy than run and hide and wait for the bad guy to kill you. By the way, we should also specify here, and it's very important that you know this, I'm not an FBI hater. I think the 7th floor of the FBI needs to be gutted. No doubt about it. It needs to be gutted. And many of those people that are there should be tried, should be investigated and tried for treason and punished accordingly. However, I will say this. The FBI lately has been failing severely. Let's look at some shootings in which they failed miserably. Let's start now, just for fun, for our memory is short. 2018 Florida school shooter Nicholas Cruz. The FBI reported that they ignored or didn't respond appropriately to repeated warnings about this killer. He just killed 17 people. 30 some times the police have been to his home for all kinds of violent reports. 30 plus times. The FBI had been in contact and investigated. Someone had contacted and said, this is the guy. This is the guy. He said this on social media. He said it on YouTube. He is going to become a professional school shooter. It's this guy right here. And he never heard from the agents again. That day of the shooting, the FBI confirmed that they did in fact drop the ball. In 2017, New Mexico shooter William Atchison was interviewed by the FBI. This is in 2016, before he killed a bunch of people. Here's one you might remember because of where it occurred. In 2016, Florida nightclub shooter Omar Mateen was interviewed twice by the FBI. And then how many did he kill in that club while reloading systematically? And guess what was happening? There were many people sheltering in place. Instead of running out of a door within 10 to 20 feet of them, they sheltered in place and they were murdered. They were slaughtered. By the way, Omar Mateen, you might find the hue and cry of, let's put the left in charge, it'll be a safer, better place, be a happier, more joyful place. Somehow or another, presidential candidate, and listen, maybe he was too afraid of ending up dead, but Omar Mateen's father was within arm's reach of her during one of her speeches in Florida. How in the world does a presidential candidate, during a stump speech, have the father of the person who just murdered a whole bunch of people right behind her? How about this? You may remember this. This was a pretty big deal, and since a movie has been made about it. 2013 bomber, Boston bomber, they're called, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, was interviewed by the FBI multiple times, and the Russians, shortly before this happened, contacted the United States government and said, these two brothers, the Tsarnaev brothers, are going to commit a heinous act of terrorism on your soil. It was never followed up upon. The FBI dropped the ball. The Department of State dropped the ball. In 2015, Charleston, South Carolina shooter Dylan Roof was allowed to purchase his gun because of errors by FBI agents not filing the paperwork correctly. A technical paperwork area. Now here's one. 2009 Fort Hood shooter Nidal Hassan was carrying this very gun that I'm carrying today. This gun is what he used to do this shooting. You guys remember the Fort Hood shooting? Military members who were seeking counsel, and they were coming in to take advantage of the few benefits that they get. Many of them combat wounded combat soldiers. They came back and had no weapon to defend themselves. No weapon at all. And they were murdered, slaughtered by this guy. Here's what's interesting to find out. He was known by the FBI. He was known to communicate with many, many people who are known violent terrorists. He was known because he typed comments his own self. He made comments to his commanders and the patients and all that. And the very second that he could take his U.S. Army major's uniform off, he then put on the uniform of Islam. And he told many, many people, that they're going to pay for what they've done for Islam. Many times. The federal government failed to notify the United States Army. And guess what? He kept getting promoted and moved along and moved along. And then one day, he chose to kill our finest and brightest. Some have said FBI now stands for failed because idiots. And it's interesting to me to note that all of those I mentioned share another common trait. and I want to share it, and it's probably on the tip of your tongue. They were all prescribed psychoactive, psychotropic drugs for a myriad of diagnosed mental health issues. People killed in school shootings since 2012, 138. 138 people killed in school shootings. We're going all the way back to 2012, 138. Not a single of those lives is not important to me, and it shouldn't be unimportant to you. And in fact, I would tell you it's terribly important. 138 people killed in school shootings since 2012. The people killed in Chicago, our former president's hometown, in 2017, 650. 96.4% of those people were black. Here's the crazy thing. Nobody seems to care. Nobody on the left seems to care. I mentioned this before. I'll repeat it. The law enforcement sent to Cruz's home, the guy who just did this heinous act in Florida at a Florida school, 36 times. The school expelled him multiple times and then would let him back. He's been suspended unknown number of times. They kept letting him come back. The FBI was warned by multiple people about him. And you know what's interesting to me? I talked about agenda. I talked about propaganda. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's a lie. It just matters if you believe it. The FBI was warned. Everyone was warned. And the left blames the gun. The left and the weak and uninformed on the right, they'll carp on about how we have to do something. You all have heard this. Listen, I understand the Second Amendment and all these things, but we got to do something. If we could only save but one child, we have to do something because we have to do something because we have to do something to save even one child, one innocent, unwitting child, one precious child. Well, I throw the bovine feces flag because they eagerly scuttle innocent human lives, which they are willing to cut into little pieces and sell on the open market. Those little innocent people never escape the womb alive. That's a fact. In fact, there'll be over 3,500 killed in the United States today from abortion. There'll be no flags lowered. No presidents will shed a tear. No media hyperventilating. Be a normal day. The thing is, we'd save a lot of lives if we ban the instruments of abortion. If we did that today, how many lives? If just one. No one on the left seems to care for that comparison, though. The abortion deaths, the abortion murders versus the gun violence in school murders. They never want that brought up. Now let's look at school shootings from a different perspective. From the perspective of the dedicated but exhausted and depleted public school teacher. In many respects, this doesn't reveal the perspective of the teacher as much as it reveals the depravity of many of the students' minds. This is posted by a teacher at a high school not far from there. 6 of my students just talked all the way through the moment of silence for the dead students. Now I want you to understand, this is a teacher in a school not far from where this heinous murder of 17 occurred. I'm going to just point this out again. They're at a moment of silence for the dead students. A moment. How long is a moment? It's never usually even a minute. It's usually just until people get slightly uncomfortable. A moment. They couldn't be quiet for a moment. They talked the whole way through. You know, you think it's an inanimate object is the problem. Culture is the problem. Our music celebrates drugs, rape, gangs, and murder. Our movies make millions off of scenes of crime and murder and gunfights. We teach the children, you know what, you can do no wrong. Then we bash the law and order and tell them to hate authority. Society created this. Now, she's a teacher. Now, let's establish another baseline fact regarding the number of gun deaths and gun violence in America. But I want to start with the number one. Now, this is, I had the numbers back to 2016 through June 15th of 2016. Abortion, at that point in time, 501,325. Well, it's her body, her choice. Heart disease, 282,038 died. Cancer, 271,640. Tobacco, 160,680. Obesity, 140,939. Medical errors, 115,438. You'll notice I haven't hit school shootings yet. Medical errors, 115,439. Stroke, 61,106. Lower respiratory disease, 65,000. Stunned me. This number stunned me. 65,623. We go all the way down through accidents, unintentional accidents, hospital-associated infection, and all of those things, all the way down through Alzheimer's, diabetes, alcohol, influenza, pneumonia, kidney failure, blood infection. Drunk driving kills 15,521 people. Unintentional poisoning. This is accidentally poisoning yourself or someone else. Unbelievable. 14,580. All drug abuse, 11,479. Prescription drug, intentional or accidental overdose, 6,886. Now, murder by gun, 5,276. Murder by gun. The lowest of this category, abortion, 501,325. And the left says it's her body, it's her choice. And then we start getting to obesity and what we're saying now, body shaming, fat shaming, all these things. Well, you got to be healthy at whatever size you are. And then we get down to murder by gun, the lowest number on the list. And they say, oh my Lord, we need to do something. Let's do gun control. Now, based on those numbers, it doesn't sound to me like we need gun control. Now, here's some more baseline facts. This is important. Data is important. Accurate data. This is out about what guns can do when in the hands of a good person, when in the hands of a person who has comfort and skill at arms, a person who has a good heart, good intentions, and good preparation. The gun, is the great equalizer. In many cases, a little tiny person with any size gun can repel the biggest, scariest person. Guns. We defend our president with guns. We defend our congressmen with guns. We defend our governors with guns. We defend our celebrities with guns. We defend our sporting events with guns. We defend our jewelry stores with guns. We defend our banks with guns. We defend our office buildings with guns. Our factories with guns. We defend even our courts with guns. But what do we use to defend our children in public schools? A sign that reads thus: this is a gun-free zone. They should add in Sharpie and then call someone with a gun if there is an emergency. You see, the first thing they did in Lakeland, Florida, when the shooting started, a person picked up their phone and called men and women with guns. I would submit to you, it's too late at that point. Now, people ask, because of my unique background, having been in the different areas that I've been, they say, well, you used to be a police officer. What do you think about the gun problem in America? Well, let me make a comparison for you. Drunk driving, you saw the number I said there. It's a humongous number. Many, 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 many times the number of the people killed with a gun. That much, much lower number of people killed with a gun, the first thing the left wants to do, and some stupid people on the right, is they want to take away the instrument used. The gun. Drunk driving, a much, much higher number. Terribly higher number. You say, you know what? Let's reduce drunk driving. Let's take away all cars from all people, even the sober ones. You see, 200 million people with many more guns didn't kill anybody. In all of last year with their guns. Didn't kill anybody all of this year with their guns. Hasn't ever killed anybody with their guns. And the first thing the left wants to do, and some very poorly informed or weak-kneed on the right want to do when there's a shooting, is they want to take away the implement used. Now I'm going to share with you my answer to that question, and then let's hear from a Washington sheriff after the latest school shooting. You may not like this, but this is the way I put it when people ask me that question. Guns are inanimate objects which do not act on their own volition because they have no volition to utilize. Firearms are but tools to be used for good, and are inherently and predominantly used to accomplish good, but in the wrong hands can be misused for evil. Only when in the hands of those with evil intent are they evil tools. Those with evil intent are usually stopped by the good guys and the good girls with guns. And I'll talk more about this in a moment. We don't have a gun problem in the United States. We have instead a heart and soul problem. Not a problem of the heart and soul of the good, but a problem of the heart and soul of the evil. That's how I answer. The Washington sheriff, when a microphone was shoved in his face, just recently said the other day, obviously the leftist media is interviewing him, and they're shoving these microphones right up in his face. He said this, and he looked them right in the eye and pointed at them and the camera. You started glorifying cultures of violence. You've glorified the gang culture. You've glorified games that actually give you points for raping and killing people. Guns didn't change. We changed. My dear friend Kay Rivoli of the Rivoli Review, you've heard her on this show before, her music of she and her husband Ron. It's just amazing. They're great patriots. Shared a lot of events with them over the past several years, and I'm proud to call her my friend and sister, and Ron a great, great human being. This is what she passed along in social media from the mouth of a teacher who said it well, and now her perspective has since gone viral. This is one teacher's perspective, and perhaps it may ring true with you. Okay, this is the teacher. I'm not going to use any specific voice, but I'll just read it to you this way. Okay, I'll be the bad guy and say what no one else is brave enough to say but wants to say. I'll take all the criticism and attacks from everyone because you know what? I am a teacher. I live this life daily. And I wouldn't do anything else, but I know daily I could end up in an active shooter situation. Until we as a country are willing to get serious and talk about mental health issues, lack of available care for mental health issues, lack of discipline in the home, horrendous lack of parental support when the schools are trying to control horrible behavior at school. And I know you're probably saying, oh no, not my kid. What did you do to cause my kid to react this way? Lack of moral values, and yes, I'll say it, violent video games that take away all sensitivity to any compassion for others' lives, as well as reality TV that makes it commonplace for people to be constantly scream up and at each other's faces and not value any other person but themselves. We will have a gun problem in school. Our kids don't understand the permanency of death anymore. This teacher goes on to say, I grew up with guns. Everyone knows that. But you know what? My parents never supported any bad behavior from me. I was terrified of doing something bad at school, as I would not have had a life until I corrected the problem and straightened my rear out. My parents invaded my life. They knew where I was all the time. They made me have a curfew. They made me wake them up the moment I got home. They made me respect their rules. They had full control of their house, and at any time could and would go through every inch of my bedroom, my backpack, pockets, anything. Parents, it's time to step up. Be the parent that actually gives a crap, we'll say. Be the annoying mom that pries and knows what your kid is doing. Stop being their best friend. They have enough friends at school. Be their parent. Being the cool mom means not a darn thing when either your kid is dead or your kid kills other people because they were allowed to have their own space and privacy in your home. I'll say it again. My home was filled with guns growing up. For the Lord's sake, my daddy was an 82nd Airborne Ranger who lost half of his face serving our country. But you know what? I never dreamed of shooting anyone with his guns. I never dreamed of taking one. I was taught respect for human life, compassion, rules, common decency, and most of all, I was taught that until I moved out, my life and my bedroom was not mine. It was theirs. And they were going to know what was happening because they loved me and they wanted the best for me. There. So go ahead and say I'm a horrible person. I didn't bring up gun control, and I'll refuse to debate it with anyone. This post wasn't about gun control. This was me loving the crap out of people and wanting the best for them. This was about my school babies and knowing that God created each one for greatness and just wanting them to reach their futures. It's about 20 years ago, this year, that I started my teaching career. Violence was not this bad 20 years ago. Lack of compassion wasn't this bad 20 years ago. And God knows 20 years ago that I wasn't afraid daily to call a parent because I knew that 9 out of 10 would cuss me out, tell me to go to hell, and call the news on me, call the school board on me, or post all over Facebook and wherever else about me because I called to let them know what their child chose to do at school because they are a normal kid. Listen, those 17 lives mattered. When are we going to take our own responsibility seriously? Now, that's a 20-plus year veteran of teaching in the public schools. One of my most esteemed and admired professors, Dr. Ronald Frazier, so eloquently and truthfully recently penned, and this ties in so perfectly, I was amazed. Heart Transplants, God's Way is the title of the article. It was 1990 when my youngest brother Danny was diagnosed with a severe heart problem. December 23rd, 1980, while driving home from a family Christmas gathering, a car driven by 3 teenage boys driving under the influence lost control of their car, traveling at over 90 miles per hour. Ironically, the exact same configuration of my fatal crash. The car turned sideways at the last moment while impacting my brother's car head on. 2 of the teens were killed instantly, and his lovely wife, Marcia, of 14 years. My brother and the 2 children, Daniel and Aaron, were critically injured, suffering from multiple fractures, life-threatening injuries. Danny's injuries were even greater: broken left leg, ankle, arm, fractured jaw, and a flailed chest, multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, and other life-threatening traumatic injuries. The one injury, a flailed chest, caused the sac surrounding the heart to break, and after years of recovery and treatment, the doctors discovered that because of the ruptured sac that protects the heart from rubbing the lungs, over time, several of the heart vessels had been compromised to the point that the only thing that would save his life is a heart transplant. So, after this discovery in 1995, he was the recipient of a young youth minister's heart who died while driving home from Bible college. He was dead instantly from severe head trauma. They were able to save his heart and his lungs, and his heart now would soon be beating in the chest of my youngest brother, Danny, for the next 20 years until his passing. Wow. In May of 2015. So I am personally qualified to talk about heart transplants, both physically, my brother's, and spiritually. Fast forward 2018, when a sin-ridden young man of 19 years chose to do the unthinkable, walked into a school in Florida and executed 17 innocent people and injured several others. Those who went to that school that day never thought for one moment that this would be their last day this side of heaven. It did not take long for the far-left liberal news media and its hirelings to start demanding that America needed more gun control and that Congress needed to pass more restrictive gun laws. Please don't tell me it's a gun control issue. Don't attempt to even hint that it's the NRA or President Trump or Republicans that is causing all these mass killings on our school and college campuses. What has been occurring throughout America recently, at Las Vegas, in the school killing in Benton, Kentucky, and most recently in Florida, is not a mental health issue. We all had bullies in school when I grew up. This is not some new phenomena. And yes, we all had the weird kids in school and in our neighborhoods, and if they didn't get their way, they didn't gun down other students. Much of what is happening in our schools stems all the way back to the loss and deterioration of our families, the breakdown of the home, breakdown of marriages, values, morals, and just plain simple human decency called love thy neighbor. We've kicked prayer and God, as Joy Behar, this is not in the article, but as Joy Behar of The View says, talking to God is one thing, but him talking back is a mental illness. Well, I wonder what she thinks of Oprah and Tyler Perry, because they both have said publicly many times that they both talk to and hear from God. But The View and Behar are not calling them out. Out of our schools and our homes, and in some cases, some have even kicked God out of many churches. I have always said, this is me personally, not Dr. Fraser talking, I've always said I'm less concerned with the absence of God and prayer from our schools than I am the absence of God and prayer in the pulpits all across America. God responded, okay, you can have what you wish. I will leave you alone, and you can suffer the consequences of a world without God. Be not deceived, for God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man sows, that shall he reap in return. Galatians 6:7. It was C.S. Lewis who wrote, there are only 2 kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says in the end, thy will be done. All that are in hell choose it. Without that self-choice, there could be no hell. No soul that seriously and constantly desires joy will ever miss it. Those who seek, find, and those who knock, it is open. C.S. Lewis in The Great Divorce. We are so politically correct that we cannot govern. We are a nation on edge where anger reigns in the home, in our marriages, while spousal abuse is at an all-time high, domestic violence, road rage to the max. Anger never stays anger. It's much like a cancer. It mutates, it brews, and grows until it becomes bitterness, and then into rage, and then into an act that rage, and then to act that rage out in violence. We must not forget that anger is just one letter short of danger. Today, our children don't know what bathroom to use. We are offended by everything and everyone. Murder is now a legal crime with a new twist. It's called abortion on demand. More innocent babies, approximately 60 million babies, have died at the hands of the abortion mills than in all the men and women who have died in every war since World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Murder is illegal. Drugs are illegal, yet they both still happen. Guns and knives are not the problem. They are merely the instruments of destruction used by people who are out of control and out of God's will. For the heart of man is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? That's Jeremiah 17:9. The good doctor, Dr. Ronald Fraser, one of my favorite professors ever, he said this, and I think this is powerful. You cannot legislate morality. There is no law that can stop evil. What America needs, what the world needs, is changed hearts. And that can only happen to you by the only one who ever specializes in spiritual heart transplants. And that is that of Jesus Christ. So now we're left with some answers. We've heard some things. I've given you lots of different sources of people people on the front lines, law enforcement and others, so many others. And that has to give us answers, unless we're just too afraid to accept what we now know. So we're left with some answers here, but what are our next steps? It's important, to have knowledge. Knowledge becomes wisdom when you apply it. What are our next steps? What are our actionable items that we can do and not just talk about doing? We must know and trust and #decide, resolve, stand. And in order to know that, you've got to know, you've got to decide, you've got to examine for yourself and say, okay, these different sources make sense. And then you have to resolve, I'm going to believe this because I did my homework, I did my research. I'm going to believe, I am resolved to believe, and then you have to stand on it. And in order to do that, you got to do some research. You got to apply yourself. And then you've got to do what? You've got to, knowing the truth is one thing, you've got to live the truth in a very real world way, away from the echo chamber of the warm audiences that also believe as we do. We can say big things in church, Christians. We can be bold in there, but we have to do the right thing when we leave out of church. This is a message to believers, Christians, Jews, Catholics, and others. Are you pumped up or are you poured out? This is from the son of my dear professor, Dr. Ronald Fraser, who I just quoted. His son wrote this. As you might imagine, the son of a theologian is also a theologian himself, also a Marine and an excellent professional musician. Really an amazing guy, David Fraser. He starts off with this. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. That's Mark 9:5. How special and pumped up Peter felt being up there on that mountaintop, seeing what he saw. So much that he fell in love with the experience, rocketing his spiritual pride dangerously into the stratosphere. Then a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and a voice came from the cloud. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. Here we can see that God basically said, hush up and listen, Peter. We can equally and just as erroneously boast of our own special aloneness. And like Peter said, it is good for us to be up here on this mountain with you, Jesus, all the while ignorant to the fact that he would soon have to follow Jesus down from that mountaintop to be completely expended to failure for what was waiting for them at the bottom, afflicted and demon-possessed people. Their previous spiritual mountaintop experience was completely unable to help these people. This teaches us the important lesson that spiritual experiences have zero power in the face of affliction. It's easy to fall in love with our special aloneness with God and quickly forget that it is not about us or our personal development. Wow, strong words. Becomes more important than being poured out, offering to be expended for others. Immediately the experience begins to corrupt and putrefy like stagnant water. Dear reader, do not cling to the comfort of possessions, the companionship of family, the confidence of colleagues, the self-plotted agendas, or the busy schedules of your lucrative career. You must send them all away for a time. If you are looking for spiritual transformation, then you must allow God to get you alone where only He is there. And like Jacob, wrestle towards spiritual transformation. That's where spiritual transformation begins. Only God can choose where this takes place, but the moment it becomes all about the glory of your transformation rather than the glory of the transformer. That is the moment. You're right around the corner from a humbling failure. Do not cling to the glory of that special aloneness from spiritual ecstasies that ensued. Consider this quote from A.W. Tozer. A good rule is this: nothing that comes from God will minister to my pride or self-congratulation. If I am tempted to be complacent or to feel superior because of an advanced spiritual experience, I should go out at once to my knees and repent of the whole thing. I have fallen a victim to the enemy. Listen, too many go to church to be pumped up than to be the church that is poured out. You might think, now, what is the connection here? What in the world is Dr. Sean quoting David Fraser in this particular instance? What's the connection here? I'll tell you what it is. It is this. You cannot be poured out for something as important as this issue. Because let me tell you something, folks. whether you're a gun toter or you are not. Now, I've carried a gun professionally since 1983, and I will tell you this. The notion of not carrying a gun each day of my life is so foreign to me. It makes no sense to me. It seems insanity to me, but let me tell you something. That is a very real possibility. You say, well, not with President Trump in office. He won't allow it to happen. You know what? A lot of things end up getting taken out of the president's hands. I'm going to tell you the left's agenda, remember what I said, is a lie. They're liars, and they don't care about the 3,500 babies that are murdered by medical instruments every day on demand in America. They don't care about those. Not to say that the 17 that were just slaughtered, just terribly slaughtered in that school in Florida, weren't terribly important. 17, 3,500, no one is calling for the confiscation of the abortioner's tools. Here's some potential things that I want you to think about, and then I'll close for today, and then we'll finish this on Wednesday. I'm hoping to have a very special guest for you. We're working on making that happen now, so we believe we can. It'll be worth listening to for sure. Wednesday is going to be actionable steps that everyone can take. Now, the ones that I've given you so far are what? You've got to change your mind. If you're a Christian and you're a fence sitter, you've got to change your mind. You've got to go from being a fence sitter. You've got to go from being a person who just isn't sure. I don't have enough information. Listen, if I hear one more weak-kneed Republican on television being interviewed and saying, well, now we have 17 more students that have been murdered by a gun. What do you say now? Isn't it time for some common sense gun legislation? Listen, when they say common sense, it makes sense to them and no one else. But I'm going to tell you something. Most of the Republicans, with their wobbly, weak knees, say, well, I would be willing to consider at least starting a dialogue. What do you mean starting a dialogue? We've been talking about this since about 2008. Isn't that ironic? The explosion, pardon the pun, happened then. You've got to know what you believe. Listen, you can't decide, resolve, and stand until you decide what is true and what is not true. And once you decide where you stand, you must maintain your resolve, because you are going to come under attack. If you say, listen, taking guns away, restricting guns, that particular gun, the AR-15, it's just a monument to them. Why do you think they keep saying this, assault weapons. We've got to get these assault weapons. I had people engage me today in social media and say, Dr. Sean, you're a smart guy. Now, you can guess at that point how wrong they are. But the point is, they'll say, you're a smart guy. You know all about this stuff. How can you possibly, at this point, say that we shouldn't do something? How could you possibly want one of these guns that their only purpose is to kill as many children in as quick a time as possible? And you know, there was a time where I would engage everyone. I'd be up till 4 o'clock in the morning, typing cogent responses to them, put very plainly so they can understand, citing and footnoting and all these different things, all reliable data benchmarks and the truth. Just to put it plainly, the truth. I used to do that. I would be typing away and my little fingers were, I don't have little fingers, but my fingers were just about bleeding from, if I just give them the right information, they'll get it. They can't deny the truth. They can't reject good sources, and they can't reject the data. And you know what? I'd send it, and they'd come back with one of two things. I'm tired of arguing with you. You're a racist. You're a bigot. You know, whatever. Anti-whatever. They'll name whatever. And at that point, you know the argument is over. But here's the thing. I made a conscious decision at a certain point to pick and choose who I'm going to engage and who I'm not. It's not about winning an argument. I only pick the ones that either have a huge voice, and somewhere in that huge voice, that huge reach of their social media, someone might read what I write and go, you know what, that kind of makes sense. And I'm reading the string here, and this person is going crazy, the one advocating taking the guns away or whatever the issue is, and this guy's calm, cool, collected, and nice guy. You know, he's just coming with facts. Sounds like maybe I should listen more to what he says. It's for that jewel and the needle in the haystack, if you will, that I speak to. If they don't have that, I don't respond. You say, well, that seems cowardly. The last person in the world you would call a coward. But I'm going to tell you, you know when your breath is wasted, don't you? You know when it's wasted. But you've got to decide what you believe, and then you've got to maintain your resolve. Unwavering, relentless resolve. And you know what? I'll say this about David's article and in general. Poured out people know this. If you're poured out for God, generally speaking, those people that are poured out for God have some sense. You talk about common sense. They have common sense on this subject. They've been educated. And then they've decided, they've resolved, and now they stand. Here's some potential solutions that I just find this amazing. I picked this from social media, different things I've been asked and told that is common sense. Have I repeated common sense enough? That's the point I'm trying to get to you right now. This is common sense to them. Number one is ban all guns. Believe it or not, people, that's what they want. Ban all guns. Due to the reading of the Second Amendment and the precedents established by recent Supreme Court case, this isn't going anywhere, folks. If you think this country with 315 million, I think I read, 315 million guns, 200 plus million people who are gunners, if you think that we're going to sit idly by and become Australia, UK, and other places, you've got another thing coming. You've just got another thing coming. I just don't think maybe I'm wearing my resolve and my decision on my face, but I am standing. And I can tell you, you got another thing coming. If that's your solution, that had better be the solution you're speaking of for your home, because it will not include mine. That's not going anywhere. We're not going to stand for that. You need an amendment to the Constitution, and there will never be 30 plus states willing to overturn the Second Amendment. Never mind the multitude of good reasons for its existence. No amount of outrage will overturn it, I'm telling you. So let's just stop putting that silliness out there. Here's another part, ban all guns. Assuming you could actually overturn the Second Amendment and outlaw every firearm in the country, then you got to go out and do what? Take them from people who have lived with firearms in their homes and their lives. Listen, I'm not going to speak ill of the people in Australia or England and other places where they've allowed complete turning their rights over to protect their homes, their ranches, and themselves, their personal body. They just said, okay, I don't understand the people like that. I've been to Australia many times, I've been to England many times, and I've talked to lots of people. I must hang out with the right people, because none of those people struck me as the type of person who would go, oh, the government thinks it'll be safer if we just all turn in our guns. We'll all turn in our guns because we're good people. We want to live peaceably. So let's turn our guns in and then do that. You see, you got to come get them. I know a lot of people who that will be something on the evening news if you go and try to take their weapons from them. Famously, there are more guns than people in the United States. You couldn't come close to collecting them all. Now you say, wait a second, I bet they would try. Isn't that interesting? Look at all of the illegal aliens who was supposed to have been deported long before now. They broke that law and many others, coming to this country and staying in this country illegally. And they say, we could never round up 12 million people. And yet they're telling us, yeah, we can get to your 315 million firearms. I don't think so. Let's think about prohibition. Let's think about the war on drugs. If that taught us anything, it's that those who are intent on breaking the law will do what? They will break the law. Laws be damned. We have enough laws on the book. You know what? Let's just do this. Here's the solution, number 3. Ban scary guns like the AR-15. My answer to that was, the person went into a school with an automatic rifle, assault rifle. You know, that's what AR stands for, is assault rifle. Yeah, so they went in and they shot full auto. It was unbelievable. Full auto has been banned for a long time. Fully auto weapons. Most of these shootings, you have to have a special tax stamp only in a few states in order to own one. Most of these shootings occur with a handgun, plain and simple. That's the data. That's the reality. And these aren't going to go anywhere. Handguns in America, they're not going anywhere. The liberal at home right now shaking from almost an orgasmic fervor at the notion of taking away every handgun from every red-blooded American. I'm going to tell you, it will not turn out the way that they think. Here's the thing. The handgun is used in most of those cases, and they're not going anywhere. Murder is also illegal. They know murder is illegal. The bad guys, the crazy people, the violent people, the evil people, they already know murder is against the law, and they're still going to do it. That doesn't stop them from performing these atrocious acts. Do you think if there was a ban on shotguns? I just want to ask you. Let's pick another gun that's not as scary. If there was a ban on shotguns, do you think that would stop people from using shotguns on killing other human beings? No. No, it won't. But I'll tell you, that's one of the sweetest sounds you can ever echo through your home at night when someone breaks into your house intent on harming you, is a racking around of a well-made shotgun. Let's just ban those scary guns like the AR-15. How about this? How about we just keep them out of the hands of bad people? Wow, that's really a good idea. I'm glad that you spoke up. Keeping them out of the hands of, why didn't we think of that? Boy, we should make you king for a day. It's too bad we don't have kings in America. You'd be a king for a whole day, maybe even a year. Keep the guns out of the hands of bad people. Felons are already prohibited from possessing or being in the adjacent area of guns. They're a person prohibited. They're not allowed to have a gun. They're not allowed to be around a gun. Can't even be a gun in their house. Even if it's not their house, the law already exists. But let's not forget the overwhelming majority of these mass shootings. They're not done by criminals and their guns that were obtained legally. Most of the time they're not. Now in this case it was. In this case it was. The Parkland shooting was, he acquired that gun legally. Now there's some problems with that. There's some issues that haven't come out yet. This week will be coming out that you'll be hearing about. That will affect how you feel about that. How can you know someone's going to do this? You look for signs. You look for certain behaviors, and all those behaviors were already ignored by the time he pulled the trigger all those times. You just can't know. You can do some things, and one of the things, the sixth thing is, listen, we got to do something about mental health. This mental health, cool, yeah. So like, how about we do free psychologists? Maybe free psychologist visits for everybody. Everybody gets to go once or twice a year. You get to go to a free psychologist, provided for you, taxpayers pay for it. You go and you're in there and you know, you just talk it out. And if that person, that one person says, I don't know, now maybe they're a leftist that hates guns, they hate the sound of guns, they kind of pee their pants a little bit when they hear something that might sound like a gunshot, right? You want that person in charge, whether it's saying you, a person who wants to carry a gun, wants to possess a gun, you want that person in charge of that decision, right? We see a lot of bobbing heads, not so much. So yeah, that's not going to work out so well. But you want them to determine, and then you want them to prescribe this volunteer free psychologist to visit everybody once or twice a year. You want them to prescribe these psychotropic prescription drugs that almost every one of the major shootings, the perpetrator of the shooting was on at least one of those class of drugs. Until they act upon their illness, most people after the fact will say, hey, that person was a wingnut about to go off. And in several cases that I've already noted, they were contacted by law enforcement and they slipped through the very large cracks. Now let's not forget also, with the Doctrine House, we know this, HIPAA laws. They say we demand privacy. We demand secrecy of our health insurance records. We should, our health history, that should not be available to anybody we don't say. Well, because of HIPAA, there's no way in this world a doctor could call up, maybe somebody comes in, call up legally, without losing his license, and say, you know, this person seems a little, maybe you should talk to them. HIPAA laws. Would you endorse mandatory psych evals and screenings for everybody, every single person, and then sending those records to the government? So far, I don't see any yeses. No, none at all. How about we just do this. Anybody that expresses an interest, just in passing, about owning a gun. Tell you what, let's do. Let's have you go talk to the mental health evaluation person the government has so kindly provided, and we can talk about whether or not you're right enough in the head to possess a firearm. See, I don't think so. It'd be an insane price tag. There'd be no way to do it. But you know what? They'd do it. They'd be willing to bankrupt this country, even more than it already is, if it meant putting the guns from the hands of the everyday American into only their hands. You have to think about this, folks. I know it sounds crazy to a lot of people. We'll talk more about this on Wednesday. I know that it sounds crazy to a lot of people that a government would want to do that. But how about you study history? And between now and Wednesday, we'll give you more examples. The guy I want to have on, if we can work it out, he is a historian. He's a PhD. He's a historian of incredible proportions.
Netanyahu.
I'd love to have Netanyahu on. The giver of the nickname. Yeah, I'd love to have him on. So then here's the big thing. You ready? Here's a really big thing. This is the best one ever that anybody's ever told me. Gosh, with all these school shootings, these poor kids, we have to do something. The ubiquitous something. We've got to do something. Okay, great. Genius. What's the something? Is it all those other things that I've just real quickly debunked that are completely unactionable, they're completely undoable? Is it that? No, it's the something. It's the catch-all something. Someone needs to do something, but what? Even Barack Hussein Obama, former president, in a most recent speech, said how routine it has become, these school shootings. And he said, someone needs to do something. Last time I checked, he was president for 8 years. Just saying. And I hate to say it, but he might still be president in the little shadows of government. Listen, if you can't tell by this point, there's nothing really that government or any other organization is going to do to prevent these events. You can't. You cannot keep drugs out of the hands of those intent on doing drugs. I'm sorry to tell you. I am sorry to tell you, I personally know people who have lost beloved family members due to heroin and other, abuse of drugs, opiates and otherwise. And if that person wants to get the drugs, they're going to get it. Should we make it as hard as possible? Absolutely. Absolutely. Within the rights of all citizens, we should exercise due care and caution. But no matter what you do, a person intent on that will do it. Can't keep beer out of the hands of high schoolers intent on getting beer. I well know that. Not to confess to anything, statute of limitation, I believe it's still worn out, although my mother, almost 88 years old, would still spank my bottom. She is at least a foot shorter than me, and I am, in fact, still afraid. I'm not ashamed to say. But, IDs, other things can be faked. Hey, buddy, I'll give you $10 if you go in and give me these beers for me and my buddies. No, we're not going to drive anywhere. We're just going to sit at my friend's house. We're all going to spend the night there. We're not going anywhere. If you could just get us these beers, this case of beer would be awesome. We'll give you $10. All right, we'll give you $20 if you'll do it. Amazingly, somehow or another in America, that happens every day. If they want to do it, they will do it. I'm not saying exercise due care, caution, and controls where you can. But the fact of the matter is, the thing you can't deny is you can't keep beer out of the hands of high schoolers. You have a huge supply of weapons everywhere. Concrete federal law protecting these weapons. You'd have as much luck passing regulation against tornadoes. Hey, that's what I'm going to run for president. That's it. I've been through 3 tornadoes. I can tell you they're not fun. I'm running against tornadoes. We're not going to have. I'm anti-tornado. That's what I'm running for. But good luck with that. God has a big chuckle when we say stupid things like that. Not for nothing, it would be equally as effective. So there it is. The God's honest truth. No entity can do anything meaningful more than is presently being done to thwart a disaffected person hell-bent on committing such an act. But you can. Now let me say this. I mentioned that this recent shooter, there were many examples where I'm radio audience all around the world, I'm using air quotes, where it could have been prevented. Some failures occurred. The FBI, local law enforcement, and even in some cases, I'm not blaming the school, but I'm saying that the school suspended him so many times before expelling him. So many times. Now you might say the poor guy lost his father in 2015, lost his mother in November of this year, or of 2017. I mean, it's just terrible. We know from records that he was very much like this in the behaviors that he displayed well before either parent passed away. Now he was in someone had fostered him and was helping him out, and then 36 times the police get called to home. You say, well, you're telling us there's nothing can be done. I'm telling you, I think if everyone did what they were supposed to do, the FBI, the schools, the local law enforcement, regional law enforcement, mental health professionals, all of these things, you probably, if he's really hell-bent on it, you probably can't stop him from doing it. But one person with comfort and skill at arms, who has decided, who is resolved, and is standing in between innocent students going to school and a mentally ill or just plain evil person bent on becoming a professional school shooter. That person with comfort and skill at arms and 1 or 2 rounds properly placed, that's the only thing that's going to stop them. I'm going to talk on Wednesday about social isolation. I'm going to talk about some very plain, it's going to be some very plain, it's not going to be a bunch of double speak or anything like that. It's going to be very plain, very much kind of in your face about social isolation and why there's a trend, there's something that follows all the way through most of these mass shooting cases. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the laws that currently exist, things that we deny exist. You know, there's a federal law that says if you have an illegal alien who has been caught committing a crime, that the local law enforcement is instructed to contact federal law enforcement and say, hey, we've got a guy who is not a citizen who has committed a crime in our jurisdiction. We see that there's an ICE hold on them. We're just calling you to let you know we'll hold them here till you can get here. Please get here quick. There are cities in this country who have said, you know what, we're not going to do that. We are just not going to do that. We're going to talk about that in greater detail. Before I let you go, I'm going to tell you also, on Wednesday, we're going to give you real information on how guns can save lives. Data and actual situations that happen that you'll never hear in this country. You'll never hear the media. When a gun is used to stop a violent attack, you will never hear the media hail anyone as heroes. When I tell you that number on Wednesday, the number of cases in 1 year's time where a person with a gun, a good person, a good lady, a good man with a gun, has stopped a much worse crime. Let's look at this really quick. I'm going to leave you with this before I let you go. What usually stops a bad guy or a bad girl with a gun?
A good guy with a gun.
A good guy or a good girl with a gun. That's almost every time in all of these cases. In all of these cases. They say, well, the guy wasn't shot. This guy that did this, he wasn't shot. Cruz, he wasn't shot by the law enforcement officer, but he was engaged. And guess what he had on his hip? And guess what he had in his hands? He had firearms. And lots more of his buddies in uniform, also with firearms, were coming to help their buddy out. Because this guy just killed 17 people. No, he didn't kill himself. He didn't take that way out this time. And he didn't get in a gunfight with law enforcement and get killed by law enforcement. He just gave up. He's already admitted. I wish the press would stop doing this. They said the alleged. He's already admitted on tape that he did it. There was blood evidence on him that ties him to the crime. Everybody knew who he was. They saw him doing it. He's on video, and many of these tapes, easily discerned. You know, everybody's got a video camera on their phone, and they've poured through so many videos, and it's clearly and obviously him doing the shooting, murdering all these people. I'm going to say this, and then I'll close. And thank you to all of you who joined me in chat. I really appreciate it. Join me on Wednesday at 5 p.m., and we're gonna finish this out. But I'm going to say this to all you people of faith out there. You may feel hopeless. What in the world are we going to do? I had somebody contact me through social media today, through our different resources, and said, listen, I've got to drive on a trip. And I'm looking at this map and I'm drawing a line of how I'm going to go. And I have a concealed carry permit in my state, but I've got to go through 3 states that they don't reciprocate. They don't allow you to carry guns, either their own citizens or anyone driving through. What do? I don't want to get to my final destination and not have my firearm. That's a situation, isn't it? Happens all the time. People going from Delaware, Virginia, wherever, going through the District of Columbia to some other place. It happens with people going through New Jersey and New York. It happens in California and Illinois and so many other states. Listen, you've got to decide. Christian, you cannot be the group that wrings your hands and says, well, I don't know what we're going to do. Christians, you have to be Messianic believers, whatever faith you are that believes in God and there are redemption through repentance and the forgiveness of our sins and eternal life through Him. Whatever group, whatever flag you fly, I'm telling you, you need to lead the charge on this. And you need to not fear being made fun of. We also need to stop being the target that shelters in place. Join us on Wednesday. God bless you.
Dr. Greener returns next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And in the meantime, he'll be working to restore your freedom and your liberty. He will engage in the collision of faith and politics for you and with you. In the meantime, remember to follow him on Twitter at the Ninja Pastor and follow him on Facebook. Dr. Greener's controversial book, Excellence Killed the Church, How Mediocrity is Destroying America, is available on Amazon and at other fine booksellers. Or you can get a copy directly through his website, www.drshawngreener.com, where you can also listen to interviews and speeches and messages free of charge. Show archives are available on iTunes through drshawngreener.com.